Thank you all so much for joining us today. We're going to talk about the overview of the special education process under IDEA for ages 3 through 21. So just to tell you a little bit about Kentucky SPIN, we're the Parent Training and Information Center for the state of Kentucky, and that is through a grant from the U.S. Department of Education, and that is under the federal law IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and we have been the PTI since 1988 when Kentucky first received one. And our role, just to kind of explain a little bit about so that you understand what we don't do, which I think is just as important as what we do. We do not act as attorneys. We do not represent families, but what we do provide is we are a peer support. We are all persons with disabilities and or family members or parents of persons with disabilities helping one another, and helping parents, families, youth, professionals to understand the process and be a resource to help provide information so that you can best advocate and know the different processes that are involved. And really lending a listening ear and trying to connect, if we're not the right person, trying to connect you to who might be the right person as well. My name is Rhonda Loxton, and I have been with Kentucky SPIN for over 30 years in various capacities. I started as a teenager on sibling panels and volunteering, and I am one of 5 kids. My twin sister, Robin, had a severe learning disability as an adult, was diagnosed bipolar. She's our special angel in heaven now. My middle brother, Grant, the only redhead, Grant does use a power wheelchair. He has cerebral palsy and technically is legally blind. And then the youngest set of twins, my brother Ryan, has ADHD. And all 3 have unique experiences that come with the seen or the unseen disability. And all 3 are smarter than I could wish to be. And I truly believe that every one of us have great things to offer, and we all need to be given the opportunities to be able to flourish and be successful. I'm the proud mom of the greatest gift of my life. I foster adopted my son. He's a teen now and over 6 foot, but he'll still always be my baby. So, I know all of us, regardless of the capacity in which we are on here today, we are in this because it means something to us. And I always love learning the whys for different people, because many times you will be very surprised. We all may walk different paths, but they pretty much run parallel, I have found in my life. So I'm going to stop rambling about that, but I'll let you know Stella Beard, that's with Kentucky SPIN, is also on here helping us and going to keep me straight like she always does and catch stuff, because and she's going to be helping us with questions. We'll pause throughout periodically. You'll also see where you can ask questions in the chat, so please put those there, and we will check with Stella throughout to see if there are any questions. And then also, if we happen not to see it or not get to it, please know you can follow up with us at any time, because it's not just we're here to do this, we're gone. We are here to all work together and help the best that we can, provide what you need or the resources to connect you to those. And also, you will see that there is a handout section. And if you don't have an opportunity, or it may not show up, I've learned some people's doesn't show up right for them. Not to worry, we follow up with the webinar with a link to the evaluation, and also has all the handouts within that email. So today we're going to look at the overview of IDEA, which is just part B, about ages 3 through 21. We're going to look at the process for the IEP and the parts of the IEP, the Individual Education Program, transition planning, and some procedural safeguards that are in place under IDEA. So we're going to jump right on in. And if you all ever joined us before for some of these, you're probably tired of hearing me say it, but I am a visual person. And I want to make sure everybody understands the different parts that we talk about, where that comes from, because it not going to do you any good that, well, Rhonda said this, right? We all need to have a good understanding of where things come from and what the processes are. So the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act and ADA, they are all federal laws. Then you have Kentucky Administrative Regulations, which are our state laws, and then you will have your local policies and procedures, which will be the independent and county public school districts in Kentucky. Now, I do want to make sure that I mention, because we do have two military bases, Fort Knox and Fort Campbell, and it is a little different because Kentucky is unique in that we are one of the few states that still has the schools that are on our military bases run not through the Departments of Education under the state, which would be the Kentucky Administrative Regulations. It is actually run by the Department of Defense Education Activity, and that's also what covers when our families are overseas as well. So it is a little different than the picture I just showed you when it comes to the process here, because if the child attends school on base in Kentucky at Fort Knox or Fort Campbell, it doesn't go in this order. It does IDEA and then it goes to DODEA. So there are some different regulations in that, but we can help you with that. Now, if they attend school in Kentucky off base, then the process that I just showed you, that is the way that goes. So it can be very different for our military families, but we are here to help through that in any questions you have. Now, to kind of give you the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act guides how we all are to provide specially designed instruction and related services to children with disabilities. So many times, because the IEP is under IDEA, the federal law, and that program, the individual education program, is provided under that. And we're going to talk in a minute about qualifying for that. And it is funded in part by federal dollars. Of course, it's not funded for any state completely, like the hopes are that it would, to the level that it needed to be. But there are state dollars also that match and fall in and provide those services. Interestingly, Part C is the early intervention, which is the birth to 3, which you may be familiar with First Steps in Kentucky. So under that same federal law, that First Steps is covered under that. Now, we're just going to talk about Part B, which is the public school system in regards to that. Now, also, total side note, but there's a Part D of that law, and that's what provides, like Kentucky SPIN, and in there's at least one PTI, Parent Training and Information Project, in each state, and we can always connect you to those if you move or know of someone in another state that needs help, like the help that we provide. But that's actually funded out of Part D of that. Now, because a lot of times there may be the confusion that we feel that if we've been diagnosed with a disability outside of school, right, that it should automatically qualify us within the school system and for an IEP. That's not the case. You have to meet certain criteria to at least qualify under one of the categories of disability, which we're going to cover here in just a moment, and also need specially designed instruction and related services. So you have to have both of those. Now, the principles of IDEA, these are some key things that IDEA provides. First and foremost, a free, appropriate public education. So what this means is you are not charged by the public school system just because your child has a disability for them to be educated, right? And the services provided to them. This is to be FAPE, free, appropriate public education. And an appropriate evaluation. Again, when we look at different things, we will see that there are, different interpretations, but there are things within the processes that allow for different things to be taken into consideration. The Individualized Education Program, it is a program. It is a legal binding document. It is for everybody to be a part of it in the decision making and developing it. And that's what's key with the parent and student participation, is everybody to be an equal member and participating and offering input into that. Another thing that is first and foremost too a part of IDEA is least restricted environment. All children are to be educated with their non-disabled peers to the extent appropriate for them. So in other words, and in Rhonda's words, what this means is that they should start in the regular program with their non-disabled peers, and accommodations, modifications, supports brought to make that work. If then that's not what's appropriate for them, and it could be at different degrees, then you look at the alternatives. And procedural safeguards. There are some things under IDEA that give different rights to families. Now, the FAPE, again, because this is very key, is that it is, special education and related services provided at public expense. And anytime that you see the SEA there, that means the State Education Agency, which is in Kentucky, the Kentucky Department of Education. Now, you're going to see down at the bottom too, when you see LEA, that's going to be the local education agency, which will be, depending upon where you live and the school district you're in, that is going to be your independent or county public school district in Kentucky. And in this, FAPE is weaved throughout. Now, we're going to kind of go into an overview before we pause for a moment, an overview of the special education process and kind of dive deep into that, and then kind of get into the different parts of the IEP. So again, here, we're back to me being visual. So the process goes like this. You will have a referral, evaluation, eligibility, the IEP, placements decided last. You don't know what the appropriate placement is for a child until you've developed an appropriate program for them to know what the appropriate placement is. And then there will be a reevaluation every 3 years. So a referral, that could be anybody referring a child who may suspect that they have a disability, or they could have been diagnosed with a disability outside of school, and you may feel that they might qualify for disability with an IEP within the school system. You can make a referral. That means parents can, teachers. Now, here's what's important. The evaluation cannot take place until the parent or guardian signs the parental consent to evaluate. Once that happens, and that's why we always recommend you request an evaluation in writing and sign that parental consent as soon as possible if you want your child evaluated, because from that date you sign it, there is 60 school days for that evaluation to be completed by. Interestingly, too, I put over here, because some of our families are the military families whose child attends school on base. Because you go under DODEA and not under the Kentucky Administrative Regulations, it is 45 school days for the evaluation to take place. And they call it, once you sign the parent permission to assess form. We always give tons of names to the same thing and make things even more confusing. So interestingly, I'm going to give you several examples, because you remember in the beginning when we had the chart where it went from the federal law, went down to the state law, then the local policies and procedures. Always keep in mind, the federal law always overrides or supersedes the state or local policies and procedures unless, and this is the big if and but, right? They go above and beyond in favor of the child, or the higher one lets the other make the decision, right? So there are going to be some situations. Interestingly, one of the things that is an exception right now is in Kentucky, it's 60 school days from the date the parent signs the consent to evaluate. federal laws are reauthorized every so often. The last time IDEA was reauthorized was in 2004. Prior to that, IDEA did not have a time frame put in place for an evaluation to be completed by. So if you could imagine, that could go on forever, right? So prior to that reauthorization, Kentucky went above and beyond, and in our Kentucky administrative regulations, stated 60 school days from the date the parent signs the parental consent to evaluate. Now, when IDEA was reauthorized in 2004, they added a time frame, but it says 60 days, calendar days, unless the state already had put into place a time frame for the evaluation to be completed. So Kentucky had, so that's why in Kentucky we go by 60 school days versus 60 days, because 60 days is 60 calendar days, which would count weekends, summer breaks, Christmas breaks, which, but we don't go by that. We go by 60 school days. So that doesn't count the weekends. That doesn't count summer break. But that is why we go by that in Kentucky. Now, when the referral is made, the evaluation, again, is going to look at, the evaluation is going to help see, and in my terms, I like to look at it, where the child currently is, right? Because we need a true picture of where they are. It is going to be from a variety of sources. It won't just be one single test score that makes that up. They will take into consideration looking at how the child is currently doing at their present levels, academic and functional. It will be evaluation data. It would be input from the family. Everybody, it will be from a variety of sources. And what that evaluation then will do is see if your child qualifies under the IEP. Now, it is important to know let me back up just a moment. If your child has received an evaluation outside of school, it might be really important for you to bring that. And if you feel it gives a true picture of your child, ask that be included as part of the evaluation process, right? Because we don't want our kids to go back through tons of tests that are unnecessary. There's already been something that will help with that. But know that is not just the end all be all that's going to qualify them under that. You are just asking that it be taken into consideration as part of the evaluation process. And it could be, but it's not necessarily has to. Now, if the evaluation comes back and they don't qualify or you don't agree with the results of it, you do have the right to request an independent education evaluation at no cost to you. Now, when you do that, you've got to go through the proper process, right? You can't just go get an evaluation outside of school and take the bill and expect it to be covered. They will give you a list of outside evaluators, contractors that you can get that by. Now, when that independent education evaluation comes back, again, that's not going to be the end all be all that they're definitely going to qualify, but the IEP ARC Admissions and Release Committee team meeting will need to take that, which the parent is a critical member of, take that into consideration as part of the evaluation. Now, interestingly, this is an area too that Kentucky goes above and beyond, because the right to the independent education evaluation is under IDEA, but also too, any evaluations that take place, and this is under the Kentucky Administrative Regulations, which would be the evaluations qualifying for an IEP. Any that take place that you are not in agreement of, even after their initial evaluation qualifying, you do have the right then to also request an independent education evaluation. Now, before we get into the categories, I'm going to, let me go through that, and then I'm going to pause and we're going to check for questions. Because if you'll remember that we said that there were two areas, right? They had to qualify in at least one category of disability and also need specially designed instruction and related services, which would be their educational needs. Now, and you might think, well, why did you list the federal IDEA categories in CARA? Well, because it's important to know. Remember when I said in some areas, if Kentucky went above and beyond in favor of the child, then you go by what Kentucky says. Well, if you look the fourth down, you will see under the federal category emotional disturbance. You will see under Kentucky's emotional behavioral disability. Back in 2004, when they reauthorized IDEA, the federal law took out the part of the behavioral disturbance. Now, as you can imagine, that wouldn't be very good for many kids. Kentucky went above and beyond and left that within the category of disability. So ours is emotional behavioral disability. And that helps a great deal because there would be quite a few students who would not qualify had that been removed from there. And this was critical. They needed those supports. So you will just see where we listed them there. Also, I want to make sure that you see, and especially for our military families whose child attends school on base in Kentucky, they have their categories too, just like you have the federal and the state, you have the federal and the DODIS, the military, the categories of the disabilities. Now, let's pause for just a moment to check on any questions here.
We do have a few questions, Rhonda. The first one says, what do I do if my child's school does not want to do an evaluation or referral for special ed services?
Sorry, I was taking a drink there. That is a great question. And what you need to do is, because anyone can refer a child, what's going to be critical is you need to put it in writing. You can send it by certified mail or by email that you are requesting that, and sign that parental consent to evaluate, because as a parent, you can make that referral and send that in writing and get the parental consent to evaluate immediately, so that you're not, because we all know the more days that go by, and if they need those services, we've got to make sure that we do that. So not until you sign the parental consent to evaluate till we have a time frame to hold to. And you have the right to do that. Make that referral. So put it in writing. If you have trouble and are not able to get that, I would, by doing that, I would contact the head of special education. Each county or independent public school district has a head of special education within the district. And first and foremost, I would try within the school and request that. If you're not able to get that moving and get that consent for them to be evaluated, then I would go to the next step and request that directly from the head of special education from the district. But that is a great question. I hope that helps. Stella, was there another?
There is, and yes, that was a great answer. Do I have to use the independent evaluator that the school suggests, or can I find my own person?
So typically what happens is there would be a list. So you should have options within that list to choose. So if there may be, because I'll give you an example just personally from my family. There had been an evaluation completed on my brother that was not accurate, and sometimes some evaluators are not the best for your child, right? So not that they're not good evaluators, but from my experience, now I would have a conversation to see if at all possible it could be someone that you may know, even if they're not on the list, but you at least should be offered the list to choose from that you can go through, especially if there is someone that maybe it hasn't been the right fit for you all, so that you do have some options. Now, a lot of it too, I would just have the conversations with them about your concerns, and also kind of try to work through it that way. But you are to be given a choice that you could choose from. It shouldn't just be this is just one evaluator and go from there. But again, it's not a guarantee that it is someone that you want, that you actually are able to get them to do the evaluation. So I do want to be very clear about that. Were there any other questions, Stella?
Just one more. You said placement is decided last. Does that mean eligibility does not determine placement automatically?
I want to thank you for answering that question or asking that question. That is exactly what it means, because placement has nothing to do with eligibility. Eligibility, and this is a key factor in the law, least restricted environment. No one's going to know placement until you go through the process and write an appropriate program for the child. Then, based on the individual child's needs, placement is decided, because the eligibility is never tied to the placement. Now, sometimes people may get the words confused and say because they're placed in special education, but that's not it. Eligibility, it's important for us to understand categories for the children to qualify, right? But a category should not and is not, through the law, the deciding factor of where they are to be or not to be, right? So, and services supports, it's not supposed to be guided. Now, there are some things with certain disabilities that might be some good things that might be helpful to take into consideration. But that category is never to dictate a placement or to that this is what you do or do not get, because the whole idea is that it's individualized, and that leads us right into this, is it's individualized. It is a written statement for each child, because my brother who has cerebral palsy is not like someone else with cerebral palsy, right? So the category and the disability you qualify under is not it. We need to know it so that the children qualify and get the services and support. That should not guide the writing of the IEP and the purpose of the appropriate program for them. And so here we'll look here, and you noticed on some of the other slides, and let me just make sure, Stella, was that good then? Are we good to move on?
Yes, there's a couple of more, but we'll save them for the next section.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I love all the great questions. And so you will see on the different slides, you'll see here this has come directly out of IDEA 2004, and on the others, you'll see the CARE at the bottom. So when we're looking at the IEP, again, I'm a visual person. My brother Grant, the only redhead I was telling you about that uses the power wheelchair, so he goes around with me. Unfortunately, he couldn't join me for the webinar today, but he goes around and does a lot of this training with me, and he always explains that I use Grant's wording. He always explains it, think of building a house, right? You've got to have your foundation. If your foundation is not level, then everything you build from there is not going to work. It's going to be crooked. So the evaluation is critical in making the foundation for your child's IEP. The whole house is going to be the IEP, but you have the evaluation that then is going to give you the present levels, looking at where are they at right now. And then everything from there, your goals and objectives, related services are going to go from there. Now, it's important to know that IDEA requires that the IEP include a statement of their present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. It's very important right there that because functional performance is just as key as a child being educationally successful as their academic achievement, their letter grade, right? So we want to look at all of these areas. And what's going to happen is, and this is where we're getting into the different parts of the IEP, is you need to spend a lot of time on these present levels of performance, because everything that is decided and written from there, if it's not in the present levels, it's not going to be addressed further in the IEP. Because when you look at these different areas, it's going to be compared to their non-disabled peers. So it's critical to know where our children's strengths are just as much as it is in the areas that maybe they need help on, because our children are going to use their strengths to help with their weaknesses, just like we all do in our life. I do it every day. I don't know about you all, but one of the things when we're looking at this is making sure, because what it'll be is it'll state in there not commensurate with similar age peers, meaning that, excuse me so much, is all children are different, right? But they have to come up with sort of a standard to gauge things at different grades and levels. And that's what it's going to be compared to. So it's important to note on here their strengths, the areas that they excel in, and maybe above their similar age peers, but also too the areas that they're not with their similar age peers. Looking at the social emotional transition needs, communication. Communication is so key, because every child needs an appropriate way to communicate. That doesn't necessarily mean it's by voice, but that is going to affect them in every other area of their school success. So, because if someone doesn't have a proper way to communicate, then they're not able to achieve the other areas. Now, here are some tips that we like to suggest for that is ask for, because there has to be a lot of groundwork done prior to an IEP or ARC in Kentucky. Again, like I mentioned earlier, we call it an ARC meeting, Admissions and Release Committee meeting. IEP meeting means the same thing. The ARC team, IEP team are the same thing, and the parent and the child or youth is an equal member of that team. Now, I recommend always asking for a draft of the present levels of performance prior to the meeting. This, again, it's just a draft, but these things have to be done prior to a meeting to go over, and that will give you time to go over it. I also suggest you write your own draft level of present levels of performance by looking back at the categories. Where are areas, areas that your child excels in and the areas that they need assistance in. Here's the thing to always keep in mind. You do not have to know all the fancy terms or the different things for it. You just plain out write a list in your words. Don't worry about if it's phrased a certain way or if it is the educational terminology. That doesn't matter. What matters is you drafting that, what you see, and from you helping your child and working with your child. And make the list and bring it to the group, because you know your child better than anyone else. And especially looking at youth, and as we want our child to develop self-advocacy skills starting young, growing up, it would be important for them to be involved with this. What are areas that they see? Because it may not be the things that the rest of us see. And the same goes for you as a parent. You're going to bring things to the table that others don't, just like the teachers will that maybe you might not bring, because that's what's going to make a successful team and come up with the best present levels to then develop their appropriate program from. Give input on how your child's doing, and what they need help with, and being very honest. And taking the time to go through that is going to help. And I don't know about you all, but I get nervous, and I think I've got to not forget all the things I've got to bring up, and it will just help if you have time to sit down and go through those things. Now, know that too, if you don't bring something up, and an IEP meeting can happen at any time, ARC meeting, and it can be called by anyone. So it doesn't mean that if you forgot it in this, that it can never be brought up. So keep that in mind too. Goals. Now, there has to be a statement of measurable annual goals and academic and functional goals. It used to be many times that people would just think it is just academic. It's not, because the functional is a critical part of them being educationally successful and appropriate FAPE, free appropriate public education. Identify the skills. And this is where my brother Grant always uses the example too. Think of it, your goals, when then you go into writing goals. Your goals are going to get you from the first floor to the second floor, right? What is it within a year that you are going to be able to accomplish? Now, when you go in to that, think back the stairs that you just went up. Each step could be an objective or a benchmark, right? What are the steps that you're going to take? And these are, IDEA requires that there be a description of how they're going to make progress in meeting the annual goals, right? Because those are the bigger overarching. Now, when we look at this, you want to make sure that you increase the difficulty and increase the expectations. And always keep in mind too, though, we have the best laid plans when we think through things. If we see that things are not working, it will be critical to also keep in mind and bring those things up, because, you know, if you all are like me and my family, you know, we may have the best laid plans, but what we first thought would work does not work. And we have to readjust, right? And our kids are no different. And so we may have to look back at those prior to the end of the year if they're not making the progress, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a little bit. Or keep in mind too, if they are exceeding it, we want to meet and bump that up, because we don't want to spend a whole year on something that they're already going to be able to accomplish, and they are so close to doing it. You may only be 3 months into the school and they've achieved this, right? We want to meet and update that. There's nothing that says that those things can't take place. And I think that's critical in the communication and working together. Now, I do want to make sure that everyone does realize that when IDEA was reauthorized in 2004, they removed the requirement for objectives and benchmarks for all students, but it is required for students who are on the alternate assessment, alternate diploma track, right? Now, Kentucky administrative regulations said they are going to leave it up to the local education agency, the county or independent public school district. So they, at a minimum, have to do it for children who are on the alternate assessment. But the thing is, every IEP that I've saw since then, and working with districts and working with families, is they leave it in, because it only helps all of us to know, again, because, you know, you've got the big overarching goal, which is getting from first level to your second level, but then everybody needs to know the steps to take, and it only helps everybody to have those. But I do want to let you know that it's not necessarily required to be in every child's IEP, and it lets the districts decide. So if your district requires it, then it is to be in every, regardless if it's alternate assessment or not. Now, we'll pause here in just a moment, because I know this is a lot of stuff we're going over, and I know we have some questions, but the IDEA requires, again, the statement of the special education and related service, the specially designed instruction, and being very detailed with that. And who's going to provide that is very critical. So it's the who, what, when, and where, right? So always think of those as you're going through. Now, a related service, let's pause just a moment. I know we're getting close on time, so we may go over, but let's pause just a moment to see about the other questions.
Okay, Rhonda, it says, who would you specifically ask for that consent form within your child's school?
Perfect question. You could ask your child's teacher, or most counselors within the schools also take care of in holding the ARC meetings. I would ask them if you're not able to get that from the teacher or counselor. I would as a principal, and then if you're not able to, then I would go to the head of special education or their appointee that would handle that within the district. But that should be readily available. And it may even be the secretary at the school can provide that to you. But most schools, and again, I say most because it can be different at different schools, the school counselors are the ones who have and sort of hold and schedule the meetings from my experience within each school. Was there another one, Stella?
One more. Right now, at least. It says, does the evaluator have to have a special certification?
So under different categories, because they are different and we can get more detailed information depending upon, they obviously have to be credentialed for if it requires a certain evaluation to take place, it has to be a certified evaluator. Now, again, looking at all the different categories, there are different processes and different qualifications and things that need to take place under the different categories. So it depends on the category that you are talking about your child may qualify under, and we can connect you with that information that more detailed about under that different category, and what might be the means to which they are evaluated and make up the complete evaluation for it. But if it requires a specific type of test or evaluation, that has to be administered by a certified trained person within that. I hope that helps.
That's perfect, and that's all I see right now.
Okay, so we're going to dive right into, because I do value your all's time so much, right to the statement of related services. Now, keep in mind too, you're not just going to have an IEP that has related services. It's not a go. And you're not just going to have an IEP if your child to get a related service, right? There has to be the goals, and they need specially designed instruction and the related services. This is going to help them and support them in achieving the goals, right? So these are some examples. And again, this includes but not limited to. It could be a communication device. It could be occupational therapy, physical therapy, depending upon the disability and the individual child's needs. Because not everybody is going to need specialized transportation. But it is important to know that specialized transportation is a related services for those who need that. An example, my brother always used, it was a lift bus, right? Many times people think that's just for people in wheelchairs. There are some children who need the transportation as a related service that may not be a physical disability. And again, it's individualized. Not everybody is going to need these different things, but these will be and need to be listed and very specific in the who, what, when, and where that they get it, for how long. It needs to be very specific under the related services. Now, accommodations that are done, as this could be a whole variety. These again are just an example, and there's always an area that states other that you can put in, because again, our children are individualized. There may be an accommodation that wouldn't necessarily work for others, but it's perfect for your child. I can tell you my twin sister needed extended time. So she would have extended time on tests so that she was able to complete them. Again, not everybody needs them, and they will not need all that's listed. It is, again, to be individualized for the child. Want to make sure too, because a lot of times people get modifications and accommodations confused. So a modification would be a change in what's being taught or expected from the student. The accommodation is the change that helps them overcome the barrier that due to their disability that affects them, right? So think of it, you're modifying the assignment. It could be the same topic that all students, their non-disabled peers, are working on, but it may be modified at the level that they are on to help them, to keep increasing in the difficulty from there. The accommodation would be helping them with being able to do the assignment. It could be the writing tool, able to say the answers to you. So keep that in mind when you hear modifications and accommodations, because they are two very different things. Again, we spent a lot of time on the least restricted environment, but it is very critical that to the maximum extent appropriate, children be educated with their non-disabled peers. And in the IEP, you have to specifically state when, why, and how long they are not with their non-disabled peers. These need to be very detailed in the IEP and why. So it needs to be a very thought-through process of why and what wasn't able in the best interest of them to make it happen. So now, it does include a projected date, again, for the beginning of the services. We always want to know the frequency, location, duration, who, what, when, and where, who's responsible for it. We want to be very detailed in that so that everybody understands their role. And two, always keep in mind, and my mom, she gave me the best advice, is, and it makes so much sense, you want your child's IEP to be, no matter who picks it up, would know what the program and education is to be provided for them and would know what to do, right? So that's a thing to keep in mind there. Periodic reports. You are to get progress reports on their goals and or objectives, at least concurrent with the report cards. And I want to make sure everybody understands too, because several years back I had this come up, is that a child who has a disability in an IEP is still to get, because first and foremost, they're a student. They're a child. They are a student in the school. They are entitled to get a report card just like everyone else, right? But then you're also, when it's a child who has an IEP, along with that report card, to get and update the progress on it. Now, most of the time what I see is we anticipate them meeting the goal or objective, or we don't. That's good to know, but make sure in the IEP it spells out that you want specific progress. There is data being collected, because it's good to know if we feel like they're going to meet it or not, but that doesn't tell you where they're at on it, right? They could be at the very beginning, or they could almost be accomplishing the goal or objective. So we need to know where they're at on it. And I would specifically request that in the IEP meeting be a part of the IEP and part of the report that is provided to you concurrent with the report card. Now, one thing I want to mention, if there's not a spot already built in an IEP, keep this in mind. Your conference summary is to be an actual account of what has took place at the IEP ARC meeting. So if there's not a designated place for it to put that there, put it in the conference summary. And even if you all don't agree, because not all of us are going to agree 100% of the time, right? Even if y'all are not in agreement, whether it's the school wanting something and you're not in agreement, or you're wanting something and they're not in agreement, it at least needs to be documented in the conference summary, those requests and the need for and the reason behind those. So that's good and important to keep in mind. Now, at a minimum, there has to be an annual IEP meeting, at least one time a year. But again, you can request one at any time. The school can, you can. Now, there is a part of IDEA that states that that there can only be changes made to the IEP without holding a meeting, and typically these are just for grammatical purposes, but the parent and the school have to agree not to convene it, just to make sort of that may have been a grammatical error that was recorded. So I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of that. Now, again, it's important to have everything in writing, because if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. And to have an accurate account of what took place, and it is not to hold somebody's feet to the fire, right? It is so that we all have a clear understanding of our role and our responsibilities, because I don't know about you all, but I have tons of meetings every day, right? So, a lot of it, and I'll be the first to tell you, I would probably make a horrible teacher, and I don't know how teachers do it, because I'm just going to be honest with you. They have many children that they are providing services to. So it needs to be very specific in whose responsibility is this, so that we know what each of our roles are and who's going to be doing it, not only for them to do it, but how can we help with that, right? How can we mesh things together and really work together in the partnership? It does require that in IDEA that there be a statement of transition in the child's IEP at least by 16. Now, also, it states no later than 1 year before they reach the age of majority, which is 18 in Kentucky, and under DODIAS, which is for our military families. It just means you have to notify them, meaning them, the parents, us, right? So what that means is all of your rights as the parent under IDEA at that point, unless those rights will transfer to the child. And in no way is any of this because to let you know and for you to go for guardianship. It is to be an individual family decision on what's appropriate. I do believe every child should be their own guardian, unless it's not what's appropriate for them. But deciding to be a guardian is not a school decision, or needing to have that in place for you to still be involved with your child once they do 18. It's important that they be able to express that you are still their educational advocate and to be a part of the team. But in IDEA, it's just to notify you that a year from now, it is going to take place where these rights transfer to your child and won't necessarily be your rights under IDEA. Now, here's an area where Kentucky went above and beyond. And what we do is there needs to at least be a transition service statement in place. Now, the one before, I think I said it a little wrong. It was by 16, you would have the transition plan in place under IDEA. At least at 14 or 8th grade, you would have a transition statement in place. You can never begin too early on transition in my world and as a family, and we have went all the way through, and my siblings were all much older, right? So you can never do enough and start too early on transition. But there, at least you need to start and have that in place in Kentucky starting 8th grade or 14 years of age. The transition planning is going to be critical, and it is so critical for the child to be involved in everything done to help them to be involved. And, it's going to be, we need to let them make their own decisions, because we need to enable them, because, we may not always be there. right? What if something happens to us? So we need to work to instill these things in them and help them, because what they may want may not be what the parent wants, or me, the sister, right? We want to protect everybody, but we also need to give them the ability to have their own hopes and dreams, and do all we can, whether if you're the parent or professional, the teacher. How do we look at this and making the list and working with them? And some may be in steps, and all students, it may be to a different degree that they're involved. Again, it's going to be individualized for each child. These are some important things that they need to know, to be able to be a successful self-advocate and use their voice and be able. We want them to be, we want them to be successful, and do everything we can to help and support, but not do it for them. Now, I know we've got some questions and we're getting close on time here. I just want to say, the cycle then, it keeps repeating, right? So every 3 years you'll have an evaluation, if not sooner. Now, for some children, they don't need a reevaluation. The evaluation still gives an accurate picture. But for some students, they need a reevaluation every so often than that. And it's going to be based on your individual situation and what's best for your child. Now, you must be invited to the IEP meeting and part of the team. Now, and the student, if transition services are being discussed, they must be invited. But I recommend starting even when they're little bitty, have them come in and just say hi to the group. Start in little steps. Have them come in and tell everybody about the favorite art project that they did. Like, pick the things that are their interest that will help them and be able, something that they did wonderful to share with the group. Start with those little steps as soon as possible. Know that, though, if they're already older now, it's not too late. It's never too late. We can still do great things, but the earlier you start, it will just help things. And know that it is important to know that an IEP meeting can take place without you present, but the school district does have to document that they have tried by multiple means to work with you to get it to where you can attend, but it can take place without you. So what's really important is when you get notices for the meetings, and if you can't attend, you need to send it back, email that you're not able to, but this is when you're available. Or you can look at all kinds of alternate means to participate in that, especially with COVID. We've all been doing like video conferencing IEP meetings. There are different things that are taking place and the opportunities. IDEA started looking at alternate means, and it may be you only get an hour for your lunch. So you don't have enough time to get to the school, go back, but you might be able to pick up the phone and you could do the meeting that way. So really working with the individual family, and the school does have to document that they've attempted multiple times before they can go ahead and hold it without you, and try to the greatest extent to get it where you're there. So it's not a lesson plan. This is important. All of our children are students first, access to the curriculum, the functional academic things, just like every other student. This is to help support them in being able to achieve it. They need the specially designed instruction and related services and what's in their IEP so that they are successful with it. And it is a living document. Now, there are some, I'm just going to go over a few things right here before we start to wrap up, and I'll stay on to check with some questions because I know we're really close on the time here. IDEA procedural safeguards. It's important to know that regardless of the disability category you qualify under, you have the same equal protection as a student who may qualify under another category. It's not that you're entitled to more than the other, that it's the same equal protection. And parents must be offered at least once a year and provided with the procedural safeguards. And they may ask you if you want a copy of it, and you don't have to take it, but they do at least have to provide that access to that and ask you. Parental consent to evaluate. When they do the initial evaluation, when you have the meeting, the ARC meeting, to come back, and if they qualify and if you don't agree to them to receive the special education services, then they won't receive them. So that is also another thing that's in there. Prior written notice of upcoming meetings or changes, access to records. We already talked about independent education evaluation. There are procedures for placement changes. There's a lot of things that are covered under this, so that there are things taken into consideration and that you are aware of. Now, just as I had explained earlier, there are procedural safeguards to resolve disputes. I always recommend first working with the school, working with your teacher. If you don't get the resolve there, request an IEP meeting, work with the counselor. If you don't get resolved there, then get the head of special education for the district involved. I always recommend try all means necessary before you go to these, but again, you don't have to. But when you go to these different things, these may be the other things that are brought up. Now, under IDEA, you do have the right to request mediation. This does not mean someone is going to come in there and solve it for you. What it means is that independent evaluator, there is a form the school would fill out, and both of you all have to agree to it. So if you request it, the school doesn't want it, it doesn't happen. Or if the school requests it, you don't want it, it won't happen. You both have to agree. Now, what will take place, there's a form filled out and sent to the Kentucky Department of Education. They will send in a trained, impartial mediator that will not be from the district or surrounding area to come in. Sometimes this helps a lot because we are all in the thick of it, and especially when it's our child or our student, we are in the midst of it. Sometimes it helps from someone else to come in who is impartial. They're not either way, and help you all work to come to an agreement. Now, you do have the right to file a state complaint, and we can connect you with the process of that. That would be with the Kentucky Department of Education, and there will be an investigation and a statement that will come out from that complaint in a decision. You do also have the right to request due process hearing. I think this should be your last resort, but again, it is your decision and you know best. This is a legal hearing. So, and you know, this, what I have found from anybody who has went all the way to this level, at that point, nobody wins regardless of the decision that is announced. But know that these are the procedural safeguards in your rights if you need to go to these different ones. And that is for you to decide individually. It's not, we can provide you with the information on what you do to do this. But again, that is an individual choice because you know what is best for your child. So I do want to make sure I remind you all, we have tons of awesome webinars, 2 a week, our Tuesday tips, and then on Thursdays we do. And you can always check back with our on our website, but then also to get our e-news and on our webpage. And we have a huge video library that is available. And all of these, you'll be able to click on the PDF. And we'll make sure the 2 we have coming up next week, we'll put in the follow-up email if you would like to join that. And so we will see with the questions, but know that also contact us if we can help step through this. And you're going to be prompted for an evaluation as you leave here. If you could please fill that out, that will help us to just do better and provide the best needed for you. So I'm going to pause here and we'll stay on and see. I think there might be a few more questions, but we certainly understand if you need to go ahead because I have went over. Stella?
Rhonda, the only question that I see right now is it too late for me to start transition with my child even though they're over 18?
That's a great question. No, it's never too late. Now, as we're referring to, if it is within the school, is the first question would be is, have they already graduated school? If not, because they can go through 21 unless they graduate sooner. is that if they've already graduated, you can still do futures planning with them. You could still do things. Now, it won't be that the school system will help in that with the transition planning and the things that are in place and under the laws as part of their IEP, which will have a transition plan developed. But certainly check out, we have had many of our webinars about transition planning, advocacy. There are some great tools that you can access. And if you have any questions about that, but please know it is never too late. It doesn't mean that it will be easy and that it won't take a lot, but I know that it still can be achieved and you can still do it. And any resources that we can help you with that might help step through that process, please let us know. But I want to make sure that I say, if they still are in school and have an IEP, they should have a transition plan in place if they are already 18, because it would be in place by the age of 16. But in Kentucky, really the statement and working towards that would start at 14. So it should be there. It may not be that it is what is best and appropriate for them. So I would recommend requesting an ARC meeting to go over that and make sure that that is a game plan with having them present, your child or your youth, as well, and they're 18, so young adult, as well as you present, and work to update that and get that transition plan, what's appropriate for them, and start working on that. But I thank you all so much for joining us. I hope you all have a great day, and this has been helpful to you, and we will be talking to you all soon. Bye-bye now.